We have breaking news regarding new details about last week's strike on an alleged Venezuelan drug boat. Then, how many previous secretaries of Health and Human Services can you name? Not many, because it's the type of job where you're only known if you suck at it. And RFK Jr. is becoming very, very well known. Trump's mismanagement of the economy is beginning to reveal itself, and it's not good for America. Trump went retro with the name of the Department of Defense just in time for him to declare war on Chicago, which is the kind of thing that if you predicted it a year ago, you'd have been dismissed as an alarmist. This week, the Speaker of the House went from claiming Trump was an FBI informant on Epstein to backing off that and just saying he didn't think it was really the president who drew that dirty picture as a love letter to a criminal pedophile. In the second half of the show, we'll be joined by former Congressman Joseph Kennedy III. Welcome back to the podcast for the 54% of Americans who regularly vote for progress in every election and want to convince their friends and family members to join our majority. This is Majority 54. Ravi, before you start, I talked about this last week, and you weren't here, this Venezuelan boat. I don't know how much you've been able to follow it, but there is breaking news from the New York Times that the Venezuelan boat that the U.S. military destroyed in the Caribbean last week had altered its course and appeared to have turned around before the attack started because the people on board had apparently spotted a military aircraft stalking it, according to American officials familiar with the matter. The officials, speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss a sensitive matter, added that the military hit the vessel repeatedly before it sank. So, Ravi, last week, I talked about this as two things. One, a demonstration that with this focus on South America and Latin America, that the United States seems to be pivoting back to an isolationist world where we are constrained to our own hemisphere, our own the Western hemisphere, and not influencing the rest of the world because it happened simultaneous to China and Russia and North Korea getting together for a big summit. But then the other thing was just it made no tactical sense that they decided to blow up this boat instead of, interdicting, capturing, interrogating these folks. And now we find out that they clearly had set out to do this from the beginning, because when they had clearly not demonstrating that they were going to be, putting up much of a fight, when they turn and run, rather than board the boat, they not only fired on it, but once it was disabled, kept firing on it. So,
yeah, I mean, it sounds like murder, really. Like, if people are turning around, like, this just feels to me like a war crime of sorts. But if you look at
and we're not even sure it's a war, so it's hard to, like
right.
They claim it is.
Well, we'll get to Hegseth. He's very clear that he wants to project a certain kind of machismo on the world stage. But this whole thing reminds me, this Taylor Swift song, Mean? Have you ever heard this song?
Yeah, I'm sure. I live in Kansas City. I've heard every song.
It's basically about a guy at a bar who's just like, life is kind of passed him by, and all he does is sit at the bar and talk shit. And it's basically, this sort of refrain is, why do you have to be so mean? And I think about that with the U.S. is like, we're becoming increasingly irrelevant. We're like the high school football star who never made it out and who's sitting at the bar just talking shit about everybody else while everybody moves on. India, China, Russia are having their meetings. The EU is having their meetings. Latin American countries are moving on and learning to not trust us. Even Canada is learning to not trust us. And what do? Well, we sit around and we try to pick whatever fights with whatever the most vulnerable people we could find are. And then we talk a lot of shit like we're now the Department of War, while other people get on with like serious matters and have largely learned to either ignore us or not take us seriously. That's where we are.
Yeah, it feels very Gulf of Tonkin-y, right? Like they just decided we're going to have a kinetic engagement in the Caribbean in order to, act like we're very decisive. And then they turned around and they're like, well, let's do it anyway. For some guys who were probably pretty low level.
I never thought I would utter at least the Gulf of Tonkin. So maybe I should rephrase this. The Gulf of Tonkin, although I think the aims were sinister in many ways, at least fit into some Kissingerian like geopolitical like framework. This feels to me like just erratic, like I'm not even sure what this is about. Like what is the long-term aim of this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you pointed out, and we're going to get to it later with Hegseth. It's just like, let's look decisive all the time and look like we can do whatever we want. So why challenge us? Speaking of which, you want to take us through this public health stuff?
Well, I can't remember if it was here or on Last Debate, but I said at the beginning of Kennedy that he was gonna, and this is RFK Jr., not the Kennedy we're about to hear from later in this episode. But we got Gulf of Time. We got a lot of this is like a throwback episode.
It is, yeah.
I always think of Conan O'Brien doing his Kennedy impression, but I said it when Kennedy was first named that my biggest worry was that he was going to go hunting for evidence for his preconceived theories. And it absolutely feels like that's what's going on. He's purging the department of anybody who has any sense of scientific rigor and independence and objectivity. And he's, Lord knows if there are even that many people who will push his science, but he's kind of single-handedly going out there and hunting and pecking for people who will say things like vaccines cause autism, et cetera. And the GOP has enabled this every step of the way, but the Senate just had a hearing on where they brought him in, and it seems like they're trying to pretend like they have some kind of oversight role here. Let's go to Senator Barrasso, who I believe is a physician.
By protecting his troops from smallpox, Washington preserved the Continental Army, which allowed our nation to continue to fight for our independence. And like President Trump, I believe President Washington acted decisively to protect Americans' lives at a time of great national peril. So over the last 50 years, vaccines are estimated to have saved 154 million lives worldwide. I support vaccines. I'm a doctor. Vaccines work. Secretary Kennedy, in your confirmation hearings, you promised to uphold the highest standards for vaccines. Since then, I've grown deeply concerned. The public has seen measles outbreaks, leadership in the National Institute of Health questioning the use of mRNA vaccines, the recently confirmed director of Centers for Disease Control and Prevention fired. Americans don't know who to rely on. Recent polls said 89% of voters, 81% of Trump voters agree vaccine recommendations should come from trained physicians, scientists, public health experts. So, they believe, Senator Marshall, Senator Cassidy, they believe me when it comes to vaccines. If we're going to make America healthy again, we can't allow public health to be undermined. So could you?
So this has become a core part of the MAGA movement. Florida just became the first state in the union to get rid of any immunization or requirements for kids. So this is where we are in 2025.
I mean, you can't not be irritated at these Republican senators who, voted for the dude to be the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And now they're like, there's gambling in this establishment. It's like everybody is Susan Collins now. Everybody just has concerns, but they can't.
I wonder how many weeks you're going to do the gambling in this establishment. I'm going to keep a record.
I think I've said it 15 times. Everybody here is like the corrupt cops and Harlem Nights, man. I mean, it's just like or maybe I'm mixing my movies, but
I'm trying to smuggle in the Swedish penis enlarger, but I'm not sure if it fits exactly here. It's like that's my favorite one. So it's not my bag, baby. But I don't think that's actually a good fit for this.
I mean, well, anyway, I just so you got to get past that. It's irritating to see. But yeah, I mean, they're realizing, wait a minute, you're actually going to do this crazy stuff that you said you were going to do, and they're not. I guess maybe when they did a sort of an acquisition, when they acquired the RFK Jr. folks politically, and sort of it was like RFK Jr. instead of getting an exit, he's got to stay on and run the company for a couple of years. They didn't realize that was the deal. They thought, well, we're just getting all their people. We don't have to say all this crazy stuff. No, they expect you to say all this crazy stuff, and he's going to do all this crazy stuff.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday here in Italy, and we were talking about like food ingredients and just how much better the food supply is here and all that. And this is a guy who I suspect doesn't share our politics, but I'm not totally sure. But I was like, we were talking about RFK, and I was like,
this is an American or
an American from Louisiana.
For those listening, Ravi's in Italy currently.
And we were talking about food, and I was like, what's interesting to me is like the one thing I would have counted on RFK to do that would have been good is go after factory farms. I'd be like, that seems like common ground, right? Like that there are probably more problems with our food supply emanating from these factory farms that are like impenetrable. It's like probably easier to get into Langley than to get into some of these factory farms. And Lord knows what kind of health hazards emanate from them, including, Eric Schlosser wrote about this 20 years ago. But you know what? He hasn't done shit about it. You don't want to know why? Because I have to suspect it's very unpopular with the very powerful corporations that back Trump. And so, headline, I think RFK Jr. might be full of shit and a quack at the same time. Like, he's quacky about the quacky stuff that Trump will let him get away with. But like Musk, when his incentives align in a way to preserve his political future, just like with Musk in China, with his business future, he all of a sudden gets very cogent about, his self-interest.
I mean, he's a politician, as these next two clips are going to show, because he's just going to weave in and out of things he said in the past versus what he's saying now. And anyway, so I think that's a good tee up for this next.
It reminds me of the immigration stuff, by the way. Notice how Trump got really edgy. He got on edge about the immigration enforcement at the factory farms. But yeah, let's go to this clip. This is of RFK Jr. hitting one of these. I don't know the difference between these shows anymore on Fox, but one of those shows.
It's going to require change, and some of the people who presided over this mess have to leave.
But understand that you hired Susan Monarez, and she wrote that public health shouldn't be partisan. Vaccines have saved millions of lives under administrations of both parties. Parents deserve a CDC they can trust and put children above politics, evidence above ideology, and facts above fear. I was fired for holding that line. She said, if we stay silent, preventable diseases will return. If we act, the facts can still prevail. That was her words. How do you respond to that?
Our job is to depoliticize CDC. The problem with CDC is it was supporting dogma. All through COVID, Americans saw it for the first time. I've been watching it for 20 years.
Even your hired CDC director.
Rather than science. And what we need is a CDC director who's going to follow the science. And that's what we're going to do. We're getting rid of all the conflicts and the committees that advise on vaccines. Our kids know that they're getting the safest vaccine possible. Right now, there's only 10% of American children who are complying with CDC's recommendations. So the American public does not trust CDC. We need to restore that trust, and we're going to do that by depoliticizing the agency and returning it to gold standard science.
And for the folks out there.
So he does this thing where he says things that people agree with.
That's the trick.
Yeah, he did this when he said some loony thing that I heard Tim Miller and some other people making fun of, where he was like, I went through an airport. Have you heard this quote from him? He's like, I went through an airport and I saw all these American kids and I could just tell they have metabolic disorders or something like that. And I'm like, and Tim Miller, who I listen to his podcast all the time, I have a lot of respect for him, but I thought about it and I was like, and I forget the exact wording, but I thought about it and I was like, most normal people sitting around the dinner table talk like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I see people, and I wouldn't go as far as he goes to say that sight unseen. I could look at, your kid is, your kids are metabolically healthy, but like, let's be like, I saw True and I think he's metabolically dysfunctional. It's like a weird way to look at things. But obviously True has the opposite problem.
True just needs to eat more.
He needs to eat more, which I wish was my problem. But that, like, he always is overconfident. So let's just keep that. Like, he always has way more to say than any evidence warrants. But he starts on ground that I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that a lot of Americans agree with. We have to attack him on where he's going, not necessarily where he's starting on most of these issues, which is we do have autism is alarming. It's not caused by vaccines, right? Like, we want to get to the root of any increases in autism. Is it an increase in diagnoses? Is it an increase in actual incidents? Let's parse that data. Emily Oster is really good on this kind of stuff. I had her on the pod once before. She's really great. So I think it's really important. I guess my point is, Jason, for us not to fall into his trap by being like, kids are healthy. Everybody's healthy,
The political skill that he has learned over the last few years as he has been in politics at the highest level and in it very frequently is that term that Colbert invented that has so much staying power, which is truthiness. That ability to say a thing that is not true, but start with a premise that feels true and then make the thing seem true. The person I dealt with the most on this directly and squared off against, who had the greatest skill in this and is still on the field and still worries me, is Chris Kobach, who people remember he's now Attorney General of Kansas, but he was Mr. Voter Suppression and Photo ID. And what he would do is he would be explaining some terribly draconian anti-voter policy, and he'd say, look, it's very simple. I just don't feel that people who are not citizens should vote. Right. And it's like he just skips over that's not happening, and he just goes into it. And RFK Jr. has figured that out, and he started doing that. And what he's become is, look, the guy's not a scientist. He has some impressive degrees. None of them are in hard science. He's a lawyer by background, and he's firing scientists and saying they're not pursuing real science, and I'm the arbiter of what is real science. He is your cousin who goes into rabbit holes on the internet all the time and then comes up with his own view of things that's really not his own view. It's really a conspiracy, and we've just put him in charge of health in the country.
Yeah. I mean, that's where we are. This is like a little off topic, but there's this RFK, like he was asked about mass shootings, and I think this clip, I think, perfectly encapsulates how political he is, even as he claims he's apolitical.
He was with the rest of us on guns when he was a Democrat.
Yeah, like most sensible people, and especially somebody who is as paranoid about safety of everything, apparently, except the thing that like shoots bullets into people's heads, including the very children who he's concerned about in the airport. But let's go to this clip.
Switzerland has a comparable number of guns as we do, and the last mass shooting they had was 23 years ago. We're having mass shootings every 23 hours. Oh, there are many, many things that happened in the 1990s that could explain these. One is the dependence on psychiatric drugs, which is, in our country, is unlike any other country in the world. It could be, there could be connections with video games, with social media, there are a number of things, and we are looking at that at NIH. So we are doing studies now. We're initiating studies to look at the correlation and the connection, potential connection, between over-medicating our kids and this violence, and these other possible co-founders as well.
Okay, so this is a great example of him just having a thing he believes and then going hunting for evidence to prove it. They have video games and social media it's global. It's in every other country as well. Also, there's no evidence that there is some massive over-medication. It's just a thing he has believed, doctrinally forever. It's like it's ideological to him. But let's start. I'm going to fact check this premise. His premise is Switzerland, which hasn't had a mass shooting in 23 years, that Switzerland has gun laws and has an amount of guns that is comparable to the United States. Okay, Switzerland does have very high gun ownership by European standards. They have, on average, 28 guns per every 100 households. And in Europe, that is a lot. And there's two reasons for this. The first is that the Swiss have a vibrant sports shooting culture. I mean, you see them in the Olympics all the time doing this sort of thing. It's a big part of their culture. But the bigger reason is that they have compulsory military service, and anybody who serves is allowed to purchase their service weapon and take it home at the end of their service. This is why so many households do own a gun in Switzerland. So again, out of every 100 households in Switzerland, a full 28 guns are in those households. The United States, which he says is comparable to Switzerland, has on average 120 guns per every 100 households. So these two countries, which RFK Jr. claims have comparable gun ownership, American households have 329% more guns than Swiss households. Now, this despite the fact that we have neither compulsory military service or the option of taking a weapon home with us from the military. However, Switzerland has several things that we do not have, which he is not considering. In order to buy a gun in Switzerland, including your own service weapon as you exit the military, you must have a totally clean criminal record, and if it's a person-to-person private sale, there must be a written contract which is registered with the government, and the private seller must do all the same stuff that the government must do. Basically, there are no loopholes for private sales or gun shows over there like there are here. They have universal permitting for any purchase, which involves a background check to determine if you demonstrate any sort of propensity for violence, including mental illness or any behavior that would make you a potential danger to yourself or others. They also have a gun registry, so any gun that is purchased in Switzerland is registered to an individual, significantly increasing the incentive for secure storage, thus making guns harder to steal and decreasing the propensity of gun owners to commit gun crime. In Switzerland, if you are found to be carrying a weapon in public, you are arrested, unless you are one of the few people who has a rare public carry permit, which you can only get if you go through a rigorous process of proving that you are the subject of a tangible threat on your life. So no, gun ownership in Switzerland is not like gun ownership in America, because no developed country in the world is anything like America when it comes to guns. He is a politician. He's just saying stuff that fits the people who are now his constituents. He's just following them. He has no core beliefs other than this vaccine and drug stuff that he has brought in from the beginning.
Well, let's move to, I think that's like
that one made me mad. So
perfect way to end it. And you're on the board still of Everytown?
Giffords, yeah.
So shout out to them. We got to continue that fight. So we got some economic news over the past 24 hours. Now, it has become very clear, and there's, basically we got another revision. This will probably be one of the last ones we get to the jobs numbers before they install some stooge who's going to cook these books. But it gives us a sense of where we're heading before they start messing with the numbers. Essentially, past numbers have been revised down. We don't have to go through all the details, but essentially we have a massive slowdown in employment and an uptick of unemployment in this country. And it seems like it is tied to sectors that have exposure to tariffs. So, and I'm going to read you something from not The Nation, not from Pod Save America, but from the Wall Street Journal editorial board, which is, if you didn't notice, very Republican and pro-Trump. This is what they said. Nearly all of the new jobs last month were in social assistance and healthcare, which rely on government spending. Industries with high tariff exposure shed workers, including manufacturing and wholesale trade. Mr. Trump blamed the Federal Reserve, as he always does, and he told Americans to look for the real jobs numbers a year from now when companies supposedly finish building new plants. The jobs report probably does lock in a 25 basis point cut in interest rates this month. What Mr. Trump needs is a broad revival in business confidence of the kind that accompanied his November victory, and appeared before his tax on imports and willy-nilly interventions in private business decisions. Repeat after us. Tariffs are taxes, and taxes hurt economic growth. Mr. Trump this week asked the Supreme Court to hear the legal challenge to his tariffs on a fast track. The best news for the economy would be if the court takes up his challenge and finds them unconstitutional. That's the Wall Street Journal editorial board. Now, you don't have to agree with them on everything they say about taxes, but I think what they're channeling here is this sentiment that I think we can all agree on, which is that Trump, I think that race was overdetermined. Everybody says it was because of trans this or whatever. The biggest thing it was about was the economy. That's what Trump was trying to run on. And what is clear is that Trump and the Republicans, especially in the midterm, cannot weather a poor economy. And actually, in some ways, the Wall Street Journal might be right. The Supreme Court could rescue Trump from himself.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Like, if they step in and don't let him do the crap that he wants to do, it's going to be better for the economy, as is the case like with most things. If the court would just stop Trump from doing things, it's going to be better for the country. I'd say all things, really. And so the Wall Street Journal, it makes sense that people like the Wall Street Journal would have a problem with this essentially poorly centrally planned economy, which is really what Trump is trying to create, right? Is a Soviet style centrally planned economy that only benefits capitalism and big capitalists, which is not how it's going to work. It's just how you end up with oligarchy. And yeah, I'm sure it makes sense the Wall Street Journal is not too keen on that, particularly because one of the toughest things for people who care about markets and say Wall Street is uncertainty and volatility. And that is essentially Trump's, middle name at this point is, well, there's a lot of things that could be, but that's really what it is. It's uncertainty and volatility, and it's just bad for the markets. And then they keep, as we'll get to a clip in a minute, they just keep saying, no, everything is great. And at some point, that's not going to actually work politically, to just tell everybody that everything is great, because they're going to feel it that it's not.
Yeah, it's like, I think about this with the Supreme Court. And so the Supreme Court has agreed to take up the tariff question, and they're fast tracking it. So they're going to hear arguments in November. And normally they would issue an opinion in June. It seems like Trump really wants a decision to clear everything up. I think because he anticipates a good decision.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
good for him.
The language of the statute is fairly broad and vague, and talks about emergency powers. It is so similar to the student loan language that it raises a lot of questions here, Jason, about the impartiality of this Supreme Court. So here's how to think about this. If the Supreme Court lets Trump do this, then shocker, they're a completely political institution. Like this is basically the same thing, claiming an emergency. And honestly, like Biden probably had a better case for what an emergency was at that period of time. But like Trump saying there's an emergency, he needs to issue tariffs. And there's this whole major questions doctrine thing that we talked about back then. We don't have to go through it, but basically it's like this idea that if Congress passes a vague statute that's broad, the Supreme Court under this court has been reining in under Biden, the president's ability to take those broad statutes and do things that aren't explicitly named, even if the broad language would allow it. And so this is a textbook case of that. So if the Supreme Court has any semblance of objectivity left in them, which I don't anticipate, then they will strike these down, and actually indirectly do Trump a favor. If they are intimidated by Trump or just super partisan, they'll let him do it. But the irony is they may actually be hurting the Republican project long term by letting them go through this.
That's a great point. It's a great point. Should we look at this clip real quick of the Treasury Secretary being like his just dogmatic response on tariffs, and then we'll go to a break here in a second.
Let's do it.
A new high. Hasbro says they're going to have to increase their prices. Goldman Sachs says 86% of the tariff revenue collected so far has been paid by American businesses and consumers. So just bottom line, Mr. Secretary, do you acknowledge that these tariffs are a tax on American consumers?
No, I don't.
Even though you have companies saying they are going to have to increase prices, and given the fact that 86% of these tariffs so far have been paid by Americans.
You're quoting Goldman Sachs. So
yes, Goldman Sachs, correct.
I made a good career trading against Goldman Sachs.
Okay, all right. I do want to talk.
Well, I don't even know what the hell that means. I mean, it's like, congratulations, buddy, you made a lot of money. I don't know how the average American is supposed to find that relatable. Like, great, good for you. Also, is that really how it works? Do you trade against gold? Was that what you were doing? You were just shorting Goldman Sachs stuff all the time? No, that's not how it works. I don't think it's a zero-sum game.
What's amazing to me is, like, you could imagine the version of this guy in the George W. Bush administration. Yeah, and it's just scary to see people turn into these clowns. Like, it's the Rubio phenomenon, right? There's a certain brand of people, Stephen Miller, who are going to be wildly sociopathic and just frighteningly evil in plain sight under any circumstance. Like he most of us, if we went to Duke University in the early 2000s, we would be like enjoying ourselves and drinking a lot and just hanging out and watching great basketball. He apparently was like writing screeds about, white supremacy and, masculinity and, anti-immigrant stuff even back then. So like, that's the kind of guy who, no matter what, this Besant figures, Rubio, are kind of shapeshifters. And I actually think it tells you how fragile our democracy is, that these people will so quickly start parroting the party line and doing their little Trump impersonations. And I don't know if you covered this last week, but it might have happened after the episode last week, but there was the the tech CEOs in the White House. I honestly couldn't get through 30 seconds of the video of them all just groveling to Trump. And I'm like, this is disgusting. Like, this is a president with low approval ratings, like that many of you, like Tim Cook, said he was unfit for office after January 6th. And now all of a sudden you're like the North Korean cabinet.
It is sad when smart people have to act dumb
Right.
in order to be in power. It just doesn't. I mean, on either side of the aisle, it's bad when it happens, right? If you just have to act stupid to be in charge, you're probably not going to do good things. It's
Right.
So, all right. When we come back, we are going to discuss several other things, and we will be joined by Joe Kennedy. So that should be fun.
Yeah, and before we get there, just a final plug. We have I've been working on this podcast in about the 20 years since Hurricane Katrina and how the school system has been dramatically transformed. We just dropped our 5th and final episode. You can get it at Where the Schools Went, wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen to all of them. It's kind of like an audio book. If you listen to it all together, that gives you a real sense of this point in history. And I'll give you a taste of our last episode. Here's just a clip of an interview I did with a guy who went to school in the New Orleans public schools in the 70s and 80s and talks about how the national conversation got a bit muddied after New Orleans saw some progress 10 years after Katrina.
There are two camps. Nationally, there was a camp that was dedicated from day one, making sure this thing didn't work out, making sure that every negative possible story that could come out of New Orleans was highlighted and spread quickly. And then the other group really was the people that were supportive, the builders, the educators, the thinkers, the doers, the electeds. And, there was a lot of talent that just poured in from like all over the place, which is probably what makes it really different than a lot of places, because when have you ever seen talent mobilize and just go to San Antonio, or just like all the talent go to Des Moines?
When we relaunched this podcast, it seemed like we had to figure it all out on our own. Scripts, setups, filming schedules, logos. It was super overwhelming. And every day it seemed like we had a new decision that needed a new answer. And when you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. The Midas Touch Network is proud to have their own store using the Shopify platform. You can get started with your own design studio with hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand style, accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Now get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. You could easily create email and social media campaigns whenever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing, returns, and beyond. Turn your business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/majority. Go to shopify.com/majority, shopify.com/majority. For men, dealing with ED can be uncomfortable, which is why HIMS provides access to a comfortable solution with an online process and personalized treatment options. HIMS is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. HIMS provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable tablets, Viagra, and Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% less. And the process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. You just fill out an intake form on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. And with hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, HIMS can help you find the ED option that works for you. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/majority That's HIMS.com/majority for your personalized ED treatment options. HIMS.com/majority. The featured products include compounded products which are not approved nor verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality by the FDA. Prescription required. See website for details, restrictions, and important safety information. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
Joe Kennedy III. I was just going to bring in Joe.
Oh, great. Do it.
So Joe Kennedy III is a former Peace Corps volunteer, former prosecutor, former member of Congress from Massachusetts, the president of Citizens Energy, and the founder of Groundwork Project. Joe, how you doing, man?
A lot of formers there, Jason. A lot of formers.
Hey, man, I got a lot of formers.
A lot of formers.
I got a lot of formers, and I got a lot more gray than you do.
And just it's because it's the beauty of going on a non-high def screen, I guess, right? It's like
yeah, I should figure this out.
Make things blurry, right? And so camera.
It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I don't know if you and Ravi have met before. I don't think so.
Not, I don't believe.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Pleasure.
Well, I'm excited to have you on, and we're not going to talk a lot about your uncle because we already did that before you came on, but it feels to the audience, it feels weird to not ask you one question about it since we happen to have been talking about it a lot. And so look, you have put out statements. Everybody knows where you are on it. I will just ask you the question that I'm curious about, which is like, what has this been like for you personally? Just to you've talked about that a little, but just like as a human being who's active in this world, and then this is going on, like that's got to be very difficult.
Shitty is probably the best word for it.
Yeah.
Like, listen, man, I guess what I would say, like, it's a big family, right? We're used to plenty of disagreements, and like that's fine. And we grew up with a lot of strong people around the dinner table over, when we get together in the summer or whenever, and like I remember that, and that's fine, and that's good actually, right? Like it was a space where like you could disagree and like people would get passionate, Irish, and like, but then you come back together, and the thing that you knew, family's been in the public life for a long, long time, which gets complicated, but been in the public for a long time. But the thing that is that like there's always a thing to come back to, right? No matter what happens out there, you always have a family here, right? Mm-hmm. And like it's as tight a rock and a foundation as you can get. And what a blessing that is. And so this is hard because, you don't criticize family because it's right. God. I do think that I disagree, obviously, fundamentally and passionately with Bobby, obviously, over this stuff. I do believe he thinks he is doing what's right, which is why he's willing to bear the cost of some of this. I can't imagine he doesn't see it and feel it. I think he's wrong. And I think it's going to do tremendous damage to a lot of people, and people are going to get sick and hurt and die because of it. I think what I want to make sure kind of like folks that don't, are criticizing him and such also don't lose sight of here in like a Maha movement part, which again, I don't subscribe to, but like what emanates from that is a lot of questions and pain, right? It's like kids that are sick. And it's folks that have sought answers from the traditional kind of treatment systems out there and like didn't get them. And I got young kids, and like there's nothing any parent, irrespective of politics, nationality, anything, there's nothing any parent won't do for a child. So like trying to find answers for that kid, for your kid, anybody would go to the end of the earth for it. And that to me is also the most tragic part, is you've got parents that are looking for answers and trying to make their kids healthy or keep them healthy. And we're destroying our public health systems to try to answer that pain, which like the pain is real. Let's find ways to address it. And if there's reforms that need to be made to our health system, do so, fine, right? I don't think anybody's debating that our health system can't get stronger. I don't think destroying the CDC is what solves that problem.
Well, I really appreciate the thoughtful response to that. And I know like part of the problem right now, not problem, but everywhere you go, you've got to talk about this for this reason. And I feel for you because many people have a relative who's off the reservation politically or whatever, and most of the time everyone else doesn't know that. And so
Yeah,
I feel for you about that. And
well, I appreciate it. And like, he's still family. His kids are my cousins, and like,
totally get it.
Yeah, it's tough, right?
Yeah, I totally get it. I'm not going to make you talk about it anymore unless, Ravi, you have a follow-up about it.
No, talk about it. No, I am curious. This wasn't in our outline, but I used to do a lot of education work in Mississippi.
Yeah.
I think you've been spending some time down there. I'd love to hear about that.
Robbie, when you were talking in the last segment and some of your work, New Orleans post-Katrina, one of the groups we support is Steps Coalition, which I don't know if you're familiar with them, but it's an organization based in kind of the Gulfport, Biloxi, so down on the Gulf in Mississippi. And it started as a coalition of 20 different organizations that came together after Katrina to highlight the fact that New Orleans obviously got pummeled. And what happened, there was a catastrophe and a tragedy and atrocity that necessitated all of the extraordinary work that went into it to rebuild the magical place that New Orleans is. And as you kind of highlighted, like, people from all over the country came and spent a lot of time and attention to try to help, right? Which is an amazing thing, right? An amazing thing that so many people did. The Gulf of Mississippi got hit almost worse, if not worse, by some metrics, worse than even New Orleans did, but didn't see all that surge. And in fact, part of what the Steps Coalition was pointing out was that in our work with them was, there's a big bill that spent, I think, allocated a couple $100 million to try to rebuild the housing stock that got wiped out across it when the houses down there, it's a low-level coastline. And so a 20-foot storm surge just surged over everything and wiped out a lot of the housing stock. So I think it was $100 million or something that went back into the Gulfport region to try to rebuild the housing stock. And it was instead diverted to rebuild the port, the Navy base there, which then goes to a contractor, which was then supposed to, when they reallocated, supposed to support 1,500 jobs. It's now automated. So $100 million was supposed to go in there to build housing stock for low-income folks living in Gulfport and Biloxi. Instead, went into revitalize now an automated port that gets to the benefit of a government contractor instead of the people of Mississippi, right? So you unpack the layers of not just what ran up to Katrina, but what happened post-Katrina, and the history of Mississippi. And, obviously people know an awful lot about the fact that the slave economy and the enormous extraction of human labor that went in to build up these plantations and support the Confederacy and the entire economy around it. It's an extractive economy today, right? It ain't slavery, but man, it's. I was down there a couple months ago, and somebody said, in some aspects, we aren't better off than we were a couple of decades ago. No one said during slavery, of course, but a couple of decades ago, because at least then we owned some of the land we had. Now we have to rent it, right? Because it's been taken away from us because these economies are set up still to be extractive. So, your work dedicated in the schools and the education system there, there's so many more layers to this, and there's so many more levels to this, and there's so much more work to be done. And as you know from spending time in that region, there are absolute heroes that are doing this work that is unsung, that is below the spotlight or out of the spotlight, that people don't know and don't get to meet. But when you are down there and you get to meet these folks, it is inspiring. It is reinvigorating. And you just sit there and go, Jason, boggles my mind. For a Democratic Party that often sit there and goes, what do we do? How do we rebuild? Mm-hmm. For fuck's sake, spend 5 minutes down there with folks doing this work and support them. And if you do that, you will know exactly what to do, and you will know exactly how to rebuild. You will know exactly what language to use and how to talk to people, and what to do to support people that are doing everything they can to show that they care for the neighbor.
I have some breaking news I got to bring in here that's unrelated to, in a perfect world, we'd be talking about Mississippi for the rest of this episode. I'm so fascinated by your work there, and it's a state that needs a ton of attention. We were talking about gun control and gun safety earlier in this episode, and it looks like Charlie Kirk, the conservative commentator, was just shot in the neck at an event at Utah Valley University.
Jeez.
I'm still looking, it's happened literally as we were just talking just now. So It's unclear if he's going to make it through or not. And I think this is, obviously we don't know a lot about what happened, but I think like this is another example of like, regardless of what the details are here, that even, in the spirit of what you were talking about earlier about disagreement and all that, is like, no matter what I think of his views, it's like, one of the reasons why we want gun control and gun safety is so that everybody is safe, not just people we agree with.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we don't know anything about it right now, so we can go back to the conversation we had and just say, like, we hope he's okay.
I hope he's okay.
Yeah.
It's not going to solve anything. Right.
Right. Let's, and because we don't know much, we'll go back to the conversation we were having. And what I would say, Joe, is like, as you were talking about that just now, and it's a good segue into the groundwork project, which I want you to talk about, is I remember the first time you and I ever met, we sat down and one of the first conversations we had, which was really interesting to me and said a lot to me. And it was basically where I was like, oh, I'm going to get along with this guy. This is going to be fun. Because somehow or another, we started having a conversation about, you represented, we were in your office in DC, you were still in Congress, and you represented a reliably Democratic district in Massachusetts. And what we were talking about is the difficulty of communicating to people in our own coalition about how to reach out to folks in places like West Virginia, which is one of the states where you are focused. And it was because at the time there was a big conversation going on, I think, about, I think it was Obama's plans in terms of power and that kind of thing. And I remember one of the first conversations we had was just you telling me about all the people in your district who were like, why don't these people who have been, coal mining families in West Virginia for so many years, why don't they just move? And how you were just saying, like, so I have to say to my own constituents, like, because that's their home, like, this is our home. And it's just like a perfect thread to the work you're doing now. So if you want to talk about that for a minute and why you're passionate about it and that kind of thing.
So listen, you're kind of referencing some of that stuff, Ravi, as you, I don't know if you know this, but I was running around the country raising money for a bunch of different candidates and such when Jason was running for Senate. And literally everywhere I went, everybody was like, oh, Jason Kander was just here. He's the coolest. And who are you? Right? He's everywhere.
Yeah. And then 2 years later, I'm showing up places and they're like, Joe Kennedy is coming.
Right. Well,
and I'm like, oh, okay.
They ain't saying that anymore. Right. Life comes at you fast. A lot of formers.
A lot of formers for both of us.
Life comes at you fast. But look, I thought one of the things that I thought was brilliant, and obviously, politics have gotten complicated, even more so than was that's extraordinary ad that you made during that race, assembling a military weapon blindfolded, right? Which, at least my interpretation, I don't want to speak for you, but was a sign to folks that, like, you're not afraid of a gun. And that's, I think, oftentimes on the left, it gets framed as a policy question, not a cultural question, right? Mm-hmm. And how I interpreted that was to say, look, I understand this community, I understand this culture, and I understand, right? I don't fear it, and you don't have to be afraid of me. And look, I get the podcast recently, Jason, where somebody was asking me kind of that question that I would get all the time of events, town halls, fundraisers, etc. Somebody raises their hand and says, Democratic messaging, it stinks. Okay. Sure, I guess. Like, how would you solve it, right? And I say, well, all these folks are voting against their interests. If the message was good, they vote for their interests, and it's because you guys don't know how to talk to people. And like, if you just kind of slow it down and speak more clearly, people will understand you better. Like, well, okay, maybe that's true. And to some extent, message can always get better. Sure. It could also be that people actually understand the message and they're just not voting for what we're telling them. So, like, how many of you in this fundraiser in New York City, on the Upper East Side, want me to, increase taxes to fund government programs? Every hand goes up. I'm like, great. You think you're patriotic because you're willing to raise your taxes and spend more money to fund programs to help people. That's great. I agree. Thank you. But you're voting against your economic interest. So when a poor person from West Virginia does the same thing, somehow they're stupid.
Right.
Why? Like, is it that they're dumb and maybe the message isn't clear? Or it could be that they're also telling you now for 20 straight years, you're not going to buy me off with a Medicaid expansion. But the way, the same Medicaid expansion that actually isn't covering all aspects of the care that I need. And by the way, where we have an opioid addiction that was supposedly regulated by the federal government, that if anybody happened to look would know that they are pushing pills into our communities and getting us sick and profiting off of it. So like, no, I ain't buying. And it could be that maybe that's the message they're trying to send. And so maybe what we should be doing is like knocking on some doors and asking the question of like, what's on your mind? What is happening in your community? And is there a way in which we can help or somebody else can help? And by the way, I think in a lot of these communities, Jason, the answer isn't, they're not looking for government to solve that problem. Communities can solve that problem, right? But government can help communities do it. When I was running around the country again years ago doing this stuff, I was trying to articulate this message to somebody who goes, I got the perfect slogan for you. Unfortunately, the Home Depot stole it. I said, what's that? He said, you can do it, we can help, right?
Yeah, it's so right.
But there's parts of this where, I mean, Ravi, what you saw in New Orleans was that when it came to neighbor helping neighbor, people surged to that support. We saw it after Maria and Irma and what happened in Houston and Texas. You see it in emergency situations, natural disasters all the time, right? Project Rubicon, others, where communities come together to help support one another. What we need to do, if you believe in that, the power of that connection and the ability to then lift people up from it, we should be finding ways to support that and bringing people together and build community around it, rather than just saying, hey, you know, what we're really fighting over is, you know, some cut to a budget that nobody actually understands or sees or whatever else. What you see is like, hey, my kid can get into an after-school program, and that means I have to leave my job, which means I'm going to get fired from my job because I got to care for my kid, but I can't get a schedule. I can't, like, none of this works. Like, let's help make it work.
You know what was interesting is, like, I think we're all about the same age, and when we were graduating from college, there was this sense that the best thing you can do is go into service. So obviously some people went into the military. Obviously, Jason, like my brother, I went into education. You guys both went into politics. I also went into politics eventually.
Joe went into Peace Corps.
Peace Corps.
Yeah.
So like that is like, and there was this sense out there that there was like this Paul Farmer-esque, like, I'm going to go out there and try to solve the world's problems. And there were problems with the way we thought about these things, and there was like a hero complex and all that. But by and large, I think it was a largely positive sentiment. And the Financial Times just put out an article a couple weeks ago that was looking at data of the next generation, but all generations really. And what they saw is a stark decline in conscientiousness and idealism, particularly stark among young people, but all of us now. And I'm wondering what place our politics has. You know, I suspect our politics has done some things to drive down that idealism for sure, but what role can politics play in lifting it back up?
I think you can obviously do a lot, Ravi. I love the Paul Farmer reference. Huge fan of his work from Boston. We're going to claim him on this one, right? Doctor at Brigham Women's Hospital for a long time, and then did work all over the world, right? Public health work all over the world. Haiti, Rwanda, and plenty of other places, South America too. But he really pioneered this field of medical anthropology. And I cite this, bear with me for the tangent here, because I actually cite him in this all the time about what ails the Democratic Party. We are so good at diagnosing problems, right? You guys know plenty of people that know how to use Stata Wellink, run a regression analysis, and come up with like very sophisticated economic analysis as to what is wrong with a community, what is wrong economically, what is wrong, you know, to your healthcare system, what is wrong with anything. And we give you a white paper, say, here's what's wrong with you. Diagnose a problem. What Paul Farmer realized was like, hey, you can diagnose, but you actually got to treat. In order to treat people, you got to understand them. So we developed this field of medical anthropology to say, hey, I know what an ARV is, and I went through this entire educational, you know, high educational training to understand what antiretrovirals will do for an AIDS patient. But like, they don't know that. So how can I translate what an ARV is to something that somebody will in the Haitian Plateau or in sub-Saharan Africa or someplace else will understand? And we can actually, tuberculosis or other and we can actually treat them on something that they will understand, so that they will then choose to get treated or prevent it. And the best example I got from this is a great movie with Philip Seymour Hoffman and Robin Williams called Patch Adams. You guys ever seen it?
Mm-hmm. I met the real Patch Adams after the movie. Hey, real quick, I want you to finish this thought, but I have a hard out today. Ravi, you and Joe are having a great conversation. I nominate the idea that I do this quick live ad read. I go to my thing and you all keep talking about this. Does that work?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So Joe, hang tight. Thank you for coming on. From me, I'll be rolling out, but first I'm gonna do this ad read and then I'll go and you two keep talking. So go ahead and throw me to that, Jeremy, will you? You've probably seen a million ads for hair growth products and thought, sure, like that actually works. I did too, until I found out that Nutrafol isn't like the rest of them. Nutrafol is physician formulated, clinically tested, and dermatologist recommended. If dermatologists recommend it, Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1.5 million people. I mean, how great that we're doing this ad when we have on a guest with a great head of hair. You can feel great about what you're putting into your body since Nutrafol hair growth supplements are backed by peer-reviewed studies and NSF content certified, the gold standard and third-party certification for supplements. See thicker, stronger, faster-growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month's subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code MAJORITY. Find out why Nutrafol is the best-selling hair growth supplement brand at Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code MAJORITY. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code MAJORITY. Typical children's vitamins are basically candy in disguise, filled with 2 teaspoons of sugar, unhealthy chemicals, and other gummy junk growing kids should never eat. That's why Hi-Ya was created, the pediatrician-approved, super-powered, chewable vitamin. While most children's vitamins are filled with 5 grams of sugar and can contribute to a variety of health issues, Hi-Ya is made with 0 sugar and 0 gummy junk, yet it tastes great and it's perfect for picky eaters, i.e. kids. Hi-Ya fills in the most common gaps in modern children's diets to provide the full body nourishment our kids need with a yummy taste that they love. Formulated with the help of nutritional experts, Hi-Ya is pressed with a blend of 12 organic fruits and veggies, then supercharged with 15 essential vitamins and minerals, including vitamin D, B12, C, zinc, folate, and many others to help support immunity, energy, brain function, mood, concentration, teeth, bones, and more. It's non-GMO, vegan, dairy-free, allergy-free, gelatin-free, nut-free, and everything else that you can imagine. Hi-Ya is designed for kids of all ages and sent straight to your door so parents have one less thing to worry about. As you know, I'm a father, and I'm always on the lookout for the best possible vitamins for my child to take. I'm so happy that I've come across Hi-Ya Health. The ingredients are amazing, and I don't have to worry about sugar or gummy junk because Hi-Ya Health is made without that stuff and is still able to keep the great taste, which is super important because that's how you get kids to eat it. We've worked out a special deal with Hi-Ya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you must go to hiyahealth.com/majority. This deal is not available on the regular website. Go to hiyahealth.com/majority and get your kids the full body nourishment that they need to grow into healthy adults.
Well, Joe, we lost Jason, but I would love for you to just plug the work that you're doing at Groundwork.
Well, thank you. And look, Groundwork's mission here is, and the thesis of it was to say, there's from the time I spent in office, right? You traveled all over the country campaigning for other folks, but it was always to win the next race. And the challenge of that short-termism is that a functioning democracy, a healthy and accountable country where everybody has a stake in it and participates in it, needs more than just a question of, who can win the next congressional race or city council race or whatever else. It's like democracy is a muscle. It needs to be invested in and nurtured. And different parts of the country actually believe different things. And that's great. That's the whole point of democracy. It's not that everybody's supposed to agree on everything all the time or have a certain viewpoint that is uniform. It's you want a place that is diverse and different and thinks about things differently and can come together to build consensus and then move our country forward. But when politically and civically we only invest in certain parts of it, it means that political power gets concentrated places and actually then democracy erodes because you focus solely on the races that can that will flip control of the House or the Senate or the Electoral College for the presidency, but not all of these other places where people still live and they still got local challenges and big problems that they need government to try to confront. And so we started groundwork to try to do that long-term investment in local communities and community organizers to be able to, these folks that are just kind of have that magic that bring people together to confront a issue that confronts their community, and can then help build up that, as we call it, civic infrastructure to be able to help candidates run for office and then hold folks accountable once they are in office and actually have a more healthy, functioning civic environment. So we focus on the plains and the deep south in Appalachia. We're in Alabama, we're in Mississippi, we're in Oklahoma, we're in West Virginia. We support about 45 different organizations across those states that are doing great work to try to, again, support local leaders that are confronting challenges that confront their communities. And these people are magic, right? They're just doing incredible things on very thin budgets with very little resources, and any bit of attention and support that we can provide them, they do incredible things with. So it's been a inspiring and refreshing way to deal with some of the challenges that I see coming out of Washington, D.C. That is a fundamentally different view about how we address the issues of the day. But man, you see what folks in Mississippi and West Virginia are doing to try to fight for their neighbors and their communities, and it's pretty amazing stuff. And just like what you saw down in New Orleans after Katrina.
Well, Joe, that's wonderful stuff. Is there a URL or something where people can give to? Just go to Groundwork.
So you can check out groundworkproject.com, and there's a bunch of information there, and there's a way to donate. Obviously, a bunch of our stuff is tax deductible, C3, and would love to help in the support. So thank you. And Rafi, thanks so much for having me. Really
great, Joe. Thank you so much. We'll send you off. I got some housekeeping at the end here, but thanks, man. It was great meeting you.
Thanks so much.
All right, everybody. I am in Italy. I think Jason probably talked about this last week, but I am spending most of the next year here. And, longtime listeners will know I kind of focus on learning something new every year. This year, it's Italian cooking with a mixture of also some Italian language. And I'm in a beautiful Tuscan town. I'll tell you more about it, but if you want to follow my journey, but also some writing I've been doing outside of politics, you could subscribe for free to my Substack, which is realravigupta.substack.com. That's realravigupta.substack.com. I think we can also link to it in the show notes of the podcast, so make it easy for you. But what you'll read there is both a longer explanation as to what I'm doing over here, but also I'm starting to tease out more deeper explanations for just the way we're living now, things like digital distraction and the disintegration of community and deep work, caring for aging parents, differences between the generations. So you could read all about that there on the Substack, and I try to post things that are not the kinds of things that would show up on the podcast. So you can check that out at realravigupta.substack.com. But with that, remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.